Most rulers would die for their crown, but one man actually put a price tag on the throne of an entire empire. He traded his divine right for bags of gold, but he didn't realize the sale included the lives of his successors. A displaced bloodline is coming to collect. What happens when the most powerful seat in the world is sold to the highest bidder? Behind the luxury of the usurper's palace, a shadow lineage has spent generations perfecting the art of the hunt. This isn't just a political struggle. It's a systematic execution of a centuries-old blood debt. This is the story of the emperor who sold his throne, and the bloodline that hunted his buyers to the ends of the earth. Imagine an empire on its knees. The treasury is empty, the granaries are bare, and enemies are circling like vultures. The emperor, a man born into a lineage that stretched back 1,000 years, faced a choice no ruler should ever have to make. Let his people starve, and his empire fall to ruin, or commit the ultimate act of betrayal. He chose the latter. He put his sovereign title, his sacred birthright, on the auction block. The buyer was a fabulously wealthy merchant lord, a man with endless gold but no noble blood. The contract was shocking in its simplicity. The emperor would abdicate, handing over the imperial scepter and orb in exchange for a fortune that would allow him to live out his days in comfortable, anonymous exile. He believed he was saving himself. In reality, he was signing a death warrant for generations to come. This transaction shattered the very concept of divine right. Power was no longer a gift from the heavens, passed down through a sacred bloodline. It was a commodity, something to be bought and sold. The new emperor, the merchant lord, could never truly fill the void he had created. He sat on a throne he owned, but he never ruled. The usurper's reign began with a desperate attempt to rewrite history. He poured his vast wealth into a massive propaganda campaign, commissioning statues, paintings, and epic poems that depicted him as a divinely chosen savior. Ordered the systematic destruction of all records, monuments, and artifacts related to the old dynasty. He wanted to erase them from memory, to make it seem as if they had never existed. But you can't erase 1,000 years of history. The loyalists, nobles, who still revered the ancient bloodline, saw the sale not just as a political crime, but as a spiritual desecration. They refused to recognize the merchant emperor. Almost immediately, resistance began to bubble up from within. From the shadows, a new court was forming. The exiled emperor's children, scattered across the fringes of the empire, began to organize. They were no longer princes and princesses. They were survivors. They were hunters. And in the darkness, they began to sharpen their claws. The first generation of the displaced heirs took a secret oath, a vow that would bind their family for centuries. They swore to prioritize one goal above all else, the reclamation of their stolen crown. Personal safety, wealth, happiness were secondary to this sacred mission. They took the very gold the usurper had paid for the throne and turned it into their weapon. They used it to build a sophisticated network of spies and informants, assassins that stretched into every corner of the empire, even into the usurper's own palace. For the first few decades, they operated defensively, moving in secret, gathering intelligence, and staying one step ahead of the usurper's agents. They learned to live in the shadows, to trust no one outside their own blood. But as their network grew stronger, their strategy shifted. They moved from defense to offense. One by one, they began to pick off the usurper's key political allies. The powerful governors and generals who propped up his fragile regime, which assassination was a message, a whisper from the ghosts of the past, a promise of what was to come. This was not a simple war of armies. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Heirs knew they couldn't match the usurper's military might, so they attacked his mind instead. They orchestrated a campaign of terror designed to drive the usurper's descendants into a state of constant paranoia. Strange symbols of the old dynasty would appear mysteriously inside the palace walls. Rumors of a vengeful ghost haunting the royal family were spread through the capital. The usurper's children and grandchildren began to fear every shadow, to suspect every servant, to live in a prison of their own making. At the same time, the heirs launched a campaign of economic sabotage. They used their spy network to disrupt trade routes, trigger financial panics, and counterfeit the empire's currency. Their goal was to bankrupt the stolen throne, to inflict upon the usurper's family the same poverty and desperation that had forced the original sale. The empire began to crumble from within, its foundations eaten away by fear and financial ruin. Finally, after generations of meticulous planning, the time was right for the final confrontation. The hunters emerged from the shadows to corner the last, terrified remnants of the buyer's family, demanding the return of what was rightfully theirs. The end of the usurper's dynasty was not a glorious battle, but a pathetic collapse. The last of the merchant emperor's line, a man broken by paranoia and facing a bankrupt empire, simply surrendered. He handed over the crown and scepter, the very symbols his ancestor had bought with gold, to the descendants of the man who had sold them. The rightful bloodline, scarred and hardened by centuries in the wilderness, reclaimed their throne. Their return was not a celebration, but a somber affair. They had won, but the cost was immeasurable. The historical lesson is a chilling one. Power acquired through commerce, rather than earned through merit or sanctified by tradition, is inherently unstable. It's a house built on sand, waiting for the tide to come in. The story of this sold throne serves as a haunting reminder that in the grand game of dynasties and empires, some debts can't be paid with gold. A debt of blood is the only currency that never loses its value over time. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. Let me know in the comments what you think: can a throne truly be bought? See you next time.